All right, let's get right into it. We all learn about the Enlightenment in school, right? It's this brilliant moment in history that sort of just appeared. But what if I told you it wasn't just a gradual shift? What if it was actually a victory in a secret war of ideas that was fought for the very soul of the modern world?
And that's really the question at the heart of all this. What if the ideas that we take for granted today, things like liberty, reason, equality, what if they weren't first debated out in the open, but were whispered in private rooms, protected by secret oaths?
You see, to really get why this war was so important, we have to look at what they were fighting against. And the enemy wasn't a country, it was a system. Before the Enlightenment, Europe was basically living under what you could call a deliberate policy of one.
Now, they weren't called the Dark Ages because the sun didn't shine. They were dark because the light of knowledge was being snuffed out on purpose. This wasn't an accident, it was a strategy. Because, let's be honest, an uneducated population is a much, much easier population to control.
I mean, just think about this. It was a world of no. You couldn't speak your mind. You couldn't get an education. If you dared to have an opinion that was different from the powers that be, the church, the king, you could be thrown in prison or way worse. You weren't even allowed to read the Bible for yourself. You were just told what to believe, and that was that.
But here's the thing, and this is the fatal flaw in that whole system. You can ban speech, you can burn all the books you want, you can punish people for disagreeing, but you can never, ever control what's going on inside a person's head. You can't police a thought.
So, what do? You have these brilliant, world-changing, and totally forbidden ideas bouncing around in your mind. You find a safe place to let them out. And that need for a safe space is really what gave rise to what we know as speculative Freemasonry. It wasn't about building with stone anymore. It was about building a better world. It became the perfect crucible for these new, dangerous ideas.
And it all happens so naturally when you think about it. It starts with one person, right? They have a dangerous thought. They find one friend they can trust. That friend has a dangerous thought too. Pretty soon, these little groups start to form, all sworn to absolute secrecy. And inside these groups, they started to teach each other, creating their own little secret universities far away from prying out.
And this is absolutely crucial to understand. This was not a social club to get together for a beer. Early Freemasonry was an action. It was a mission. It was doing something incredibly important, fighting back against this weaponized ignorance and giving people an education they literally could not get anywhere else.
And when you lay it all out like this, the connection is, well, it's just stunning. It's impossible to ignore. The Masonic principles weren't just like Enlightenment ideals, they were basically the blueprint. Universal brotherhood becomes equality. Religious tolerance is freedom of conscience. Pursuit of knowledge is reason and scientific inquiry. It's the same revolutionary idea just spoken in two different rooms.
Now, this whole thing wasn't just some abstract movement. This secret war for ideas was being fought by some of the most famous people in history, and many of them found a safe haven for their radical thoughts inside these Masonic lodges.
I mean, just look at the story of Voltaire. The guy was the Enlightenment, a champion of reason, of tolerance his whole life. And then, at 83 years old, just weeks before he died, he's publicly initiated into a lodge in Paris. Think about that. It wasn't the start of his journey. It was like a final symbolic statement to the world, confirming what he stood for all along.
And get this, who was in the room watching it happen? Benjamin Franklin, a founding father of America, a world-renowned scientist, and a very active Mason himself. His presence right there connects the intellectual battle in Europe with the actual political revolution happening across the ocean in America. It's all part of the same network.
And the list just keeps going. You've got Montesquieu, the guy whose ideas literally shaped modern democracy. You've got Mozart, weaving Masonic ideas into his incredible music. And of course, George Washington, the general who becomes the first president. We're talking about the absolute titans of philosophy, art, and politics.
So, with all these incredible minds pushing in the same direction, what happened? Well, long story short, they won. The ideas they had protected and nurtured in secret, liberty, equality, government by the people, they just exploded onto the world stage. But this amazing victory created a totally new and unexpected problem.
You could easily argue that the ultimate prize from this whole war against ignorance was the United States itself. I mean, it was a nation literally founded on the exact principles that Freemasonry had been fighting for: freedom of thought, freedom of religion, freedom of expression. The mission was, for all intents and purposes, a huge success.
And that leads to the really tricky question. A soldier's purpose is pretty clear when there's a war on, but what's their purpose once the peace treaty is signed? If your whole identity is built around being a warrior of the Enlightenment, what do you become when the world is, enlightened?
And that's the identity crisis in a nutshell. This organization that was once this active, vibrant warrior, a secret university, a verb, it started to feel more like a noun. A social club, a historical society. The burning urgency that created it was gone. And for a lot of people, the purpose seemed to fade away with it.
So that brings us right up to today. The war against ignorance out there in the world might have been won, but a brand new fight has started, a war for the soul of Freemasonry itself.
This quote from one of the sources we looked at just says it all, doesn't it? The fight isn't against kings and popes anymore. The fight is now internal. It's a struggle to figure out what its purpose is in the 21st century.
And you can really see the two camps pretty clearly. On one side, you have what you might call the club mentality. It's focused on tradition just for tradition's sake, on social events, on fancy-sounding titles. But then you have this other group, a younger generation, and they're pushing for a return to the roots, to real education, to deep philosophy, to meaningful action in the world.
What they really want is to make Freemasonry a verb again, not just something that you are, but something that you do. They're looking back at this incredible history we've just talked about and saying that is what we need to be again, a real force for learning and for good.
And that leaves all of us with this final, really powerful question. If Freemasonry was born to fight the ignorance of its time, what's the ignorance of our time? Is it misinformation? Is it apathy? Is it the deep divisions we see all around us? That's the challenge this new generation is facing. And it's a powerful reminder that the fight for reason, for knowledge, and for progress, well, it's never really over. It's a war that every single generation has to fight for itself.